Learn English with Sanju. Hello everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you a beautiful and emotional story. But before we begin, let me ask you one question. Have you ever worked really hard for something, and still failed? It hurts, doesn't it? You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I should just give up. But what if your biggest failure was actually preparing you for your greatest success? Today's story is about a young girl, one interview, one rejection, and a lesson she never expected to learn. So, sit back, relax, and let's begin. Olivia had always been a hardworking student. She wasn't the smartest in her class. She wasn't the most talented either. But she believed in one thing: hard work. After graduating from college, she dreamed of getting a good job to support her parents. For weeks, she prepared for her first interview. She practiced speaking in front of the mirror. She read books. She learned new skills. She even woke up at 5 a.m. every day to study. Finally, the interview day arrived. She wore her favorite blue shirt. Before leaving home, her mother smiled and said, "Don't worry about getting the job. Just do your best." "I will, Mom." She entered the company with confidence. There were many other candidates. Some looked experienced. Some looked nervous. She quietly sat in the waiting area, holding her file tightly. After an hour, her name was called. "Miss Olivia." She stood up, took a deep breath, and walked into the interview room. The interview started well. She answered the first few questions confidently. Then, the interviewer asked one unexpected question. Olivia froze. Her mind went completely blank. She knew the answer, but fear stole her words. A few minutes later, the interview ended. As she walked out of the building, she already knew. She hadn't done well. The next morning, an email arrived. She opened it with hope. But the first line read, "We're sorry to inform you." Her heart sank. She had failed. She locked herself in her room. For the first time in years, she cried. Not because she didn't get the job, but because she felt she wasn't good enough. Little did she know that this rejection was only the beginning of a much bigger story. Olivia sat alone in her room. The rejection email was still open on her laptop. She read the same words again, "We're sorry to inform you." It felt like all her hard work had been for nothing. For the next few days, she stopped applying for jobs. She stopped studying. Whenever someone asked, "How did the interview go?" she forced a smile and replied, "It was okay." But deep inside, she felt like a failure. One evening, her father noticed her sitting quietly on the balcony. He walked over and sat beside her. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then he gently asked, "Still thinking about the interview?" Olivia nodded. "Maybe I'm just not good enough, Dad." Her father smiled softly. "Do you know how many interviews I failed before I got my first job?" Olivia looked surprised. "You failed interviews too?" He laughed. "More than I can count. Every rejection taught me something that success never could." He looked at her and said, "Failure isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you what you still need to learn." Those words stayed in Olivia's mind all night. The next morning, instead of feeling sorry for herself, she made a decision. She opened her notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote, "What can I improve?" She remembered the question she couldn't answer during the interview. Instead of avoiding it, she spent hours learning it. She practiced speaking every day. She recorded herself answering interview questions. At first, she sounded nervous. She made mistakes. Sometimes she even laughed at herself. But she didn't stop. Week after week, she became more confident. A month later, another company announced job openings. Olivia looked at the application form. For a moment, fear returned. What if I fail again? Then she remembered her father's words. Failure isn't telling you to stop. She smiled, took a deep breath, and clicked, apply. A week later, her phone rang. Hello, Miss Olivia. We'd like to invite you for an interview. Her heart started beating faster. This was her second chance. But she had no idea that this interview would be completely different from the first one. A week later, Olivia stood outside the company building. This time, she was still nervous. But she was no longer afraid. She smiled to herself and whispered, no matter what happens, I'll do my best. She walked into the interview room. The interview began. The interviewer asked several questions. This time, Olivia answered calmly. Whenever she didn't know an answer, she didn't panic. Instead, she smiled and said, I'm not completely sure, but I'm willing to learn. The interviewers looked at each other and smiled. After 30 minutes, the interview ended. As Olivia stood up to leave, one of the interviewers stopped her. Miss Olivia. May I ask you one last question? Tell us about a failure that changed your life. Olivia smiled. She took a deep breath. Then she honestly shared the story of her first interview. She talked about the rejection, the tears, the self-doubt, and how she decided to improve instead of giving up. When she finished, the room became silent. One interviewer smiled and said, we can teach skills, but we cannot teach attitude. Today, you showed us something more valuable than perfect answers. You showed us resilience. 2 days later, Olivia's phone rang. She answered nervously. Hello. A cheerful voice replied, Congratulations, Olivia. We're happy to offer you the position. For a few seconds, she couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes. The first people she thought about were her parents. She rushed home with the good news. Her mother hugged her tightly. Her father smiled and said, See. That first rejection wasn't the end. It was preparing you for this moment. Months later, a young graduate at work came to Olivia and said, I failed my interview yesterday. I don't think I'm good enough. Olivia smiled because she knew exactly how that felt. She gently said, Don't let one rejection decide your future. Because a better one is about to open. The young graduate smiled. And for the first time that day, he believed in himself again. Failure doesn't mean you're not good enough. It simply means you're still growing. Every rejection teaches you something. And every lesson brings you one step closer to success. So never let one bad day convince you that you have a bad life. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more English stories every week.